Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rad Life. I wanted to talk about some things a little bit differently today. One of the things that we are seeing as we're coming out of, or we're approaching coming back into reopening businesses, and kind of coming out of that the coronavirus crisis. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's going to be with us for a while. But we're coming out of this sort of staying at home phase, and we're going back into, if you will, general circulation. And there's certain things that got me thinking when I started reading about the guidelines that are being released from, the state of Georgia is one, the CDC, the federal government, some guidelines of what needs to be done by businesses in order to reopen. And I think those guidelines, if I had to put money on it, are not going to go away anytime soon. And in fact, if anything, they'll become more and more something that businesses will have to deal with and contend with, and in some cases may need help in meeting and exceeding, because those guidelines are presented as minimums, right? And if you're like me and you're looking at an experience, something that is, like a high-end experience, or somebody who's trying to basically solicit my business, that I will probably want more than just bare minimums, right? But with that being said, we're kind of at that threshold now where we're entering into that kind of discussion. And I wanted to shift our discussion into that. And with that being said, I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Glenn Gabbard, who is from Gabbard Energy Group. That's GabbardEnergyGroup.com is the website. And I wanted to talk about what they're seeing in the industry relevant to air quality and what can be done, because airborne particles, things of that nature, are going to be very much part of any physical brick and mortar location. That's a concern that I'm going to have to basically contend with. So without further ado, let me bring Mr. Glenn Gabbard on, and let's have a conversation with him regarding what is going on out there. Glenn, are you there?
I am.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. I mentioned before I brought you on that I'm trying to pivot the conversation from what I was talking about a week or so ago, for the last 2 weeks actually, about growth mindset, not really basically getting into a bunker mentality, and then kind of pivoting because and it was motivated kind of, or initiated by the guidelines that the states are putting out. And as we're coming out of the stay-at-home area, and I feel like Puxatawny Phil basically is sticking my head out of the hole and wondering if I'm going to have another, if I'm going to have a summer at all, or am I just going to basically stay in there until winter. But other than feeling like a groundhog, which may have something to do with the lack of being able to get a haircut and a clean, some shaving, some grooming. But that being said, I said, those guidelines are really set minimums. They're based on a minimum situation. They're not even what you as a consumer, you as a customer, you as a client is going to want. Not only just minimum assurances, that's not going to be enough. Like, well, we got minimal liability coverage. No, I'm going to want the whole boat. I'm going to know that your business actually has more than the bare minimum requirements, especially if you're trying to solicit high dollar amounts from me for products or services. So it also is a potential opportunity for differentiating yourself as a business by providing more than the bare minimum requirement. And one of the things that is critical as we go out, I mean, I've got my mask right over here, right? I mean, I'm going to be doing this, right? I'm going to be doing this all the time, right?
Exactly.
And so respiratory, touch, right? Okay. So I wanted to talk about this because the air quality is going to be important. The filtration and capturing of particles, air particles that are maybe virus or infected, that's going to be important. And we're talking about coronavirus, but there's other stuff. I mean, we're going to go into another winter season with possibly flu season or what have you, right? But
Right.
You can't, as a business, open up without having to adhere to these guidelines that are basically put out, which, by the way, even in their minimum format, are difficult. They're going to be difficult. I mean, some of them will end up meaning that businesses that are trying to maximize revenue from every square foot that they're basically leasing are going to have to dedicate extra square footage of that to functions that are not revenue generating, because that's the separation, the physical distancing, the sanitation stations. Now it's not just for your staff or your clients, but it's also for your staff. You might have to have an operational impact where, your staff that is not necessary in the touch or the proximity delivery of the service is, going to be virtually commuting. So now that changes your operational model. No touch POS stations, all of that stuff is going to incur costs. So one of the things that is also at the end of the day going to be having to be addressed, although it's not really in the guidelines yet, is air quality. And so I said to people that, I mentioned your name of your company, and take a minute basically to tell us about yourself and your company. But I really want to kind of focus on this, and you want you to tell me what you're experiencing from your side, whether that awareness is out there now and is being acted upon, and if so, how, and who you're seeing as early adapters or leaders in this push, whether it's industry or particular areas. So with that, my friend, I hand you the mic.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And to give you just quick background, my holding company, Gabbard Energy Group, is committed to working with a core group of partners that are focused on air and water quality and sustainability. I've been truly blessed to have a very close relationship with Steve Levine, who's the CEO of AtmosAir Solutions, and his son, Brian, during the past 3 years as we've worked together on a number of projects. The concept of clean air has taken on a priority now that we have not seen since the technology that we provide, bipolar ionization, was first introduced in 2004. There is now a new priority that we're seeing from prospective clients and existing clients, that in this environment, this new reality going forward, we can play a very important part as part of the overall solution to be able to give comfort as these businesses and schools and government institutions start to reopen, that when someone comes into the building, these are the things that have been done to make this indoor air and surface environment safer for me. So the gist of what we have done, to give some quick history on AtmosAir Solutions.
Please, yeah.
What Steve and the founders originally recognized was back in 2004, this process of bipolar ionization was a Swiss technology that they purchased the exclusive rights for and have continued to enhance since 2004. Just to put some perspective on this, the corporate headquarters is in Fairfield, Connecticut. There also are offices in China, Dubai, and also in Tempe, Arizona. But the composite ionization tubes that are completely recyclable that drive this technology are all manufactured, produced in the United States. So your listeners know that. The concept of bipolar ionization is one where when you're up in the mountains and when you're by the ocean, nature creates positive and negative ions that create a natural cleansing of the air. The problem is, as you know, that when we talk about indoor air quality, we're dealing with buildings that are in between and that are suffering in most instances from poor air quality. And so the process of indoor...
Well, and I put that thing on there. I know it's difficult to see for people, but it basically says that 90% of the time, our time is spent indoors. So just to kind of put that in perspective in terms of the impact of that quality, whether it's good or bad, on us, is that according to the EPA, we spend 90% of our time indoors. So this is not a passing concern. In fact, if anything, I know certain like like LEED certifications and healthy buildings, and some of these little focuses have tried to bring this into more of a regular mainstream approach to things, but it was more of a elective, I think, decision. It was more of a, yeah, it'd be nice. If we did this, we're going the extra mile. Some people used it as a competitive advantage in positioning their properties, but it wasn't really looked at as something that was essential. And I think with what's going on right now, you can make the argument that not only is it a focus, but it's actually something that cannot be ignored anymore as being instrumental. It's almost like no different than, no, wait a minute, I need filtration on my air conditioning system. I need regular maintenance for some other services that I have in my building.
The point is very well taken, that what we're seeing from a number of the clients that we're talking to now is that the idea of including a indoor air purification system as part of an HVAC retrofit is becoming something that should be a basic requirement, as opposed to something that is a luxury. And to be specific about what we bring to the table in terms of our technology, bipolar ionization, first, the system itself, as far as the ionization tubes, does not require any re-engineering in an existing building. It's a very simple procedure. The installation typically occurs in the supply duct behind the filters, usually involves one hole for a bracket on the outside with the ionization tubes that are sized to the square footage installed on the inside. The key to our system is that it is an active versus a passive system. And I'll give you an example. UV is something that is used in a lot of locations. And UV can be very effective, but it is passive versus active, because as I'm sure you know, what happens with UV is while it will kill contaminants that go into its space, it is not providing coverage for the overall building indoor airspace and surfaces. And that's what we do.
You almost have to bring the contagion or the contaminant to the UV versus be able to seek it out, if you will, or affect it where it may reside. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is absolutely correct. What happens within our system, and I date myself a little bit, but if you think of this, we flood the indoor air and the surface areas with a series of very active Pac-Men, that the positive and the negative ions. And that's right. And what they're doing is they are aggressively seeking the cells that carry the airborne viruses, whether they're in the air or on the surfaces of any building. They take the hydrogen from those cells and they render them harmless. And I think it's very important, based upon your earlier comments, for your listeners to understand that while clearly, as we have links on our website that talk about the specific benefits of our technology and process in dealing with coronavirus, that long before this became a focus, we have the same clinical studies to show our effectiveness in dealing with the norovirus, in dealing with the flu, in dealing with mold and mildew. We did a lot of work with Hilton in that area in terms of corporate case studies, allergens in the air. So there are a number of other benefits in terms of looking at indoor air quality. Also, the other basic process that the ionization, bipolar ionization, creates is this. It's a process we call agglomeration. You have volatile organic compounds in the air that typically are the sources of odors. And what happens is that from an efficiency standpoint, when our system is installed, we agglomerate those particular particles, and there's two benefits from an operational standpoint. One, the filters become more efficient.
Yeah.
And secondly, the particles become heavier. So the ones that aren't caught in the filters tend to drop to the floor. They go out with housekeeping at the end of the day. And so in a nutshell, those are the two active continuous cleaning process that we go through when our system is installed. Again, not just in the indoor air, but in the surface areas above and beyond, in the tables and the chairs, et cetera, in the building.
And that's what you mean by non-passive. That's what you mean by actually active system,
yes,
right?
That is correct. That's absolutely correct.
And you have, like you said, this is not like something that's coming out that's almost like snake oil salesman, like, where it's like we're talking about this because of the coronavirus. It's just something that you guys have already used and have sort of recorded evidence of effectiveness relevant to the flu, neurovirus, other things. I mean, I can think that medical facilities and things of that nature would be looking at this stuff and maybe already incorporate a lot of this stuff in there. And I want you to talk a minute about potentials, some of the clients that you guys have, without necessarily or naming names if you can. But the thing about this that's interesting right now is how that technology is actually going to be applicable to everything, including residential units. And you and I talked a little bit about that yesterday, where I asked you, I said, look, okay, so this is all fine and dandy and great if I'm, I know Caltech or some, university, hospital or something, but what about Joe, business owner down at the brick and mortar little restaurant that's, 2,000 square feet or something down the street, okay, or the grocery, the grocery store that's, like not even not even a Trader Joe's, a smaller little guy that basically, or a liquor store or something, or residential, somebody's home, right? I mean, you got a lot of people right now concerned about their elderly parents, actually. I mean, I'm just thinking about out loud. My parents are older too. Like, they're living, there is some restrictions as far as what I can spend on something like this versus a corporation that maybe has unlimited resources to, to install something of this nature. And you basically told me that the technology, scalability wise, is great, and price point is actually good on it, right? So
that is absolutely right. Yes.
So before you do that, though, before we talk about the nuts and bolts, like what's it going to cost me, how long is it going to take to put it in, let's talk about some of the people that may already have this that you guys have been working with, if you can.
Absolutely. Well, I think that some notable installations that your listeners would appreciate.
Yeah.
We are fully installed at LAX, and we are specified for the new people mover at LAX.
Yeah.
We are fully installed at the Staples Center. We've been working with the Empire State Realty Trust for a good period of time. We are working and installing with all of the major banks in the United States. We have over 40 sports organizations where we have installed in their arenas, their stadiums, their training facilities, et cetera. Basically, the markets that we're serving very actively, hospitals, you mentioned healthcare, that's a key area, schools, commercial buildings. We've had just an incredible expansion of new orders that have come in that area. I mentioned the airports, we have marinas, and it goes on and on. But from a
I'm gonna add a few more from your presentation, Glenn, only because I think these may also resonate with people on a lower scale level, right?
Sure.
And some of them I thought were notable just for me in terms of from a professional background, because it actually, you want to talk about street credibility when I see names like that. And your slide basically says these companies have all incorporated Atmos, BPI, and air monitoring, right? So I mean, you list, like you mentioned, commercial offices, healthcare, schools, hospitals, sports, airports, marinas, convention centers. Boy, marinas, I mean, that anybody who's ever been on a boat, right? Convention centers, grocery stores, government, performing arts. But here's some names that actually may resonate with some people. Now, professionally, you got Gensler on your list, you got JLL on your list, right?
Yep.
Professionally, on terms of the client side, you got Ritz-Carlton. You've got Carnival Cruises, again, another one that's, whether it's a boat or marina, that, anybody who's been on a cruise can relate to that. Hilton is in there. You got SpaceX blew me away. When I saw SpaceX, I was like, but WeWorks, that's a big deal, right? Because you got people that are over from different places. That's the other thing too, is that you have these environments, and you have people that are coming in from other places. There was an article today about how they are now tracking evidence that maybe the coronavirus was in the countries a lot earlier, and actually spread quite a bit at the consumer computer show in Vegas.
Yes, right.
And how that was basically a mixing of a lot of people from all over the place. And so it's kind of fascinating because, hotels, you got a good number of people here across the spectrum of places. WeWork, like I said, was like, wow, okay, I get it. So with that being said, what is somebody like average Joe? I'm going to put this thing in my parents' house, right?
Sure.
I got a small business office. I've got a small brick and mortar, food and beverage, whatever. How do you guys, if somebody asks you, what is it going to cost me? I'm not necessarily in exact, because I know you guys do your proposals relatively quickly for people, but
yes.
Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. For the residential client, and let me make a key point here. One of the areas that is really overlooked, and we're trying to reach out now, are the residential HVAC contractors when you talk about residential clients, because the nature of their business, as you know, has been the maintenance, the service calls, new HVAC systems, and the like. For your residential clients, we are really trying to reach out to those HVAC dealers as far as becoming AtmosAir dealers and offering this kind of product to their clients. Because just to put it in perspective, there's about 200 of them around the United States that are dealers. I think last time I checked, there's over maybe 100,000 HVAC residential contractors. It's a ton out there. Yeah. Now, having said that, we are very scalable. And for our typical residential client, you're probably looking at a system based upon their square footage and their HVAC unit that would cost maybe between $1,000 to maybe $1,500-$1,600 on average. And so it's something that is very reasonably priced. There's a monitor. One of the key things that we haven't touched on yet that I want to stress, aside from a ton of case studies that we have with LAX, Staples Center, et cetera, we also encourage every single client, residential or commercial, to have a monitor. We provide measured monitoring from 7 different perspectives of the indoor air quality once we do an installation, as opposed to the outdoor air. And with commercial buildings, we've even taken it to another level where we have a product that we call Atmos Smart, which integrates with the building management system to literally, in a larger project, minute by minute, the adjustments are made to the level of ionization within the building.
So you're doing real-time adjustments based on the current conditions at that moment in the building environment.
That is absolutely correct. And as I mentioned, we continue to refine this process. And it's the same thing your listeners may appreciate. When we first started manufacturing these ionization tubes, they were glass, and the typical life for maximum efficiency was a year. We moved several years ago to a composite tube, which does not break when they're changed out, has a maximum life of 2 years, and is completely recyclable.
That's wow.
And so, what happens is, in terms of making sure that we take care of our clients with every order, residential or commercial, that goes out, in the 23rd month, we send an automatic email reminding them that those tubes need to be changed out within the next month for maximum efficiency. And outside of that, once the system's installed, you might want to take a damp rag once a year and just wipe the tubes. That's it. It's self-contained.
So, Glenn, I'm assuming, you know, obviously you're involved in this. What would you, just in layman's terms, for somebody who's saying, well, what's the difference? Air is air, right? What would you say to somebody in layman's terms, from your own personal experience, if you are in an environment that has the system in place versus an environment that does not have the system in place? Again, you know, it's not necessarily by a dump or by some, you know, foul odored plant or something like that, but just in general, just apples to apples. Is
Sure.
there a noticeable difference?
There is. First off, it's you could joke and say you could smell the difference. The difference is when our system's installed is that you don't smell anything. In other words, you've got clean air. You're not getting the odors that you may have had before the system was installed. From a health standpoint, you know, clearly when you have the system that we have in place and you are having a continuous cleansing, disinfecting of airborne contaminants and surface contaminants, we would never claim and can't say that we would eliminate the opportunity to have illness, but we certainly put the odds in your favor. And, you know, when you talk about clinical studies, CBRE and JLL have done productivity studies, and Syracuse University has done cognitive studies.
Yeah.
I think that we could all figure out from a common sense standpoint that if we're operating in a clean air environment, chances are we're going to be thinking better. Well, Syracuse showed that when you're in an environment that has pure air, that your cognitive function increases. But also, as CBRE and JLL did in their studies, they looked at it from a productivity standpoint. And they said that when you look at a clean air environment, that what happens is it reduces the number of sick days that employees have. And they put a number on it that they estimate that it's over $3,000 a year per employee is the productivity benefit when a system like ours.
That's a lot. You know, I'm just curious. It just came to me. Is there actually anything that connects it? Because I know that when, you know, like sometimes some people would say, you know, sleep with the windows open, or you know, run your ionizer at night or something like that. Is there actually a benefit to, like, you know, more restful sleep? Because that's another thing that we're all dealing with right now. Stressful environments, you know, it's a different reason for stressing than we maybe did 30, 60 days ago, but we're still stressing. You know, we're in our homes. I mean, I found it very comical that, you know, when you sent me the slides, that it said 90% of the time you spend at home, and I'm like, was that before? Was this a research study results before or after stay-at-home coronavirus stuff? I would venture a guess that it's probably higher now. Maybe it should be 99 to 100%. But
yes,
is there a correlation between, like, rest and quality of air?
You know, it's a great question, and I'm not aware of specific clinical studies that we've done in that area, but I would suggest that it certainly creates a better environment to get a better night, to get that REM sleep that everyone would certainly like to get.
Well, because you have you know, oxygenation like therapy, and you know, it's even offered like at spas, or, you know, like you talk about like in Asian countries or something where the quality of air quality is not so good, that, you know, there are these oxygen bars, and so you know, it's like you're oxygenating your blood. You know, again, you know, there's that element where blood and you know, air passageways and what you put in there ends up going into your bloodstream. If you work out and you exercise, then you're breathing and vascular system is more efficiently run, and you say, oh, I just worked out and I slept really good that night, right? I'm just curious because one of the things that's I mean, this is a slightly different topic, but you know, like the number one reason people buy CBD is sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised by that. I thought, you know, it's the state of California. Why don't we just say recreational if that's what we want to do? But no, they're buying it because of sleep. And the other side of it is it seems to me, and maybe it's correlated with aging population, maybe it's not, but it seems to me like we are increasingly using what do they call them? CPAC machines. We're increasingly, seemingly, as a society, using these machines, and you know, insomnia and sleep apnea and all of this stuff. And I'm thinking, it's interesting because it's a breathing device.
Yep.
Like if I attach myself to a machine in order to better breathe and have more flowing into my system that's clear, I would think that improving the overall air quality in my whole environment is a step in the same direction. I might still need that machine, but like I'm actually attaching something to my face and trying to sleep looking like Darth Vader or something like Darth Vader, but basically it's based on air quality.
Well, that's very true, and I think
I'm just
again,
curious if there. I mean, you know, if there's a study or no study, but I would think that in itself, and again, you know, you can take it to the next level. You got kids with asthma, you got things of that nature. So again, you're spending 90% of time indoors. You're maybe spending 90% or 100% of that time right now in your own home. So that takes that whole conversation where, yes, I'm spending 90% of my time indoors, but it's not at home. It's at work. It's, you know, so it's on the company to basically provide this. It's on the landlord to provide this. You're spending 90% of your time at home right now.
that's right. And clearly what we have found from all the clinical studies is that when you are breathing and touching surfaces that have not been purified, clearly you're creating a certain level of risk for yourself that we're trying to control. And that, at the end of the day, comes down to the concept of why do you want to have a purification, sanitation process going on in any indoor environment,
Right.
in the air and in the surfaces on an ongoing basis. And
Glenn, let me just add one other caveat to that particular side of the conversation. We are basically, and I had this conversation a few months, maybe about 2 weeks ago, with somebody who basically does not believe in chemical astringents and cleaners, right? And basically, yes, what you're doing right now in your own home, which is where you're sequestering for protection, is by multiple cleaning. And if you're using something that's chemical, you're actually releasing stuff into your home environment, be it by touch or air or whatever, that's actually chemical. And you're doing it, you know, whereas you may have wiped that counter with a Clorox wipe maybe once a day, you're not doing it 3 or 4 times a day. Like you're exposing yourself to a lot more chemical ingredients that are foreign usually to your environment. So what's the mitigation measure that you're also doing?
I agree. You know, we say to people that whether it's a restaurant reopening or a store or a commercial building, I hear a lot of discussion about, and there will continue to be a lot of discussion about, hey, here's what we're doing for additional cleaning steps as part of our, cleaning process every day. Well, the reality is, whether you're talking about mass transit or you're talking about a building environment, or you're talking about your home, you're not doing that on a continuous basis. You may be doing it periodically in the home. You may be doing it typically once a day or maybe twice a day in the building at best.
Yeah.
And so there's a gap there. And that's a gap that we can fill. And that's why we get back to the idea of having an active versus a passive process, and a process that not only continuously cleans and sanitizes the air, but also, as importantly, the surface. Because as we learn more about coronavirus, we understand that we've got to deal with both of those areas when we're trying to contain any spreading, in addition to the mask and any other protective measures, the distancing that we take and the like.
Well, and you know, there is a such thing. I mean, my sister is one of those people where, you know, if she smells, you know, Dettol or Lysol or something like that, it immediately takes her back to her younger years, where we were basically living overseas, and like how that associates in her mind to that. So a lot of people that will associate with smell as being some sort of indication that it's healthier because I can smell this disinfectant. Well, that's
Right.
only going to happen for a certain period of time. I think it's almost like a little you know, what do they call them? Like floaties. It's like it's a safety mechanism. If I can smell it, then it's there, right? Yeah. Well, you know, my guess is somebody's going to come up with candles that smell like that, and basically, you know, it's now I'm walking into a place that has a candle smell that's faking it. But that's my jaded side talking. The reality is, if you are going into an environment like a restaurant, like a retail shop, something of that nature, you are now by requirements, bringing it back to the guidelines that are being out there, you're by requirements being asked to actually provide individual resources for everybody who's working there that has to physically be in the space to actually be able to sanitize themselves, clearing things around. You know, in some cases, it's staggering the workforce. Like I said, it's being taken very lightly right now that these applications is, hey, we're going to open our doors. No, take a little closer look at the, you know, the devil's in the details. Look at the details. There's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to be done to compliance. But one of the things that is also happening, and I have not seen anything in the guidelines about it, and it may be just a matter of time. You and I were talking about this just before, is the air quality. Because if I'm putting all these astringents and cleaners and everything into that space, right, how long before somebody basically claims that they're having a hard time breathing because of all the fumes from the cleaners that are in the place? So if you're a company, what are you doing to mitigate this thing that you're doing? It's kind of bizarre. It's like almost like taking a pill for one thing and having taken another pill for to offset the byproduct, you know, the side effects of the first pill. But that's the world we're living in. And so do you look into a system that that does this for you efficiently, that you can, more importantly, you can actually have documentation that supports the fact that you're stating to the client and the customers, we're taking every precaution to meet the minimums and then some, and here's some of the stuff that we are doing. That becomes something I mean, I would not be surprised if within a few months we're seeing that stuff on Yelp for that business, or on their Facebook page under, you know, frequently asked questions, or on their website. I mean, that's the world we're living in. We're going to have to do this in order to psychologically satisfy people's need to feel safe.
I agree. I mean, and because of NDA requirements, there's some that I cannot discuss, and you referenced some of the clients that we have.
Yeah.
But the new retrofitting for building safety from a health standpoint is going to be something that's going to separate one company, one brand from another out there in the marketplace, because there is a new awareness. And of course, it's terrible that it's taken a pandemic to bring the awareness to the level that we've been discussing today. And we all, obviously, it's horrific. But if you look at positives, aside from families maybe getting to know each other a little better, that, you know, have been passing during the day and the night, being forced to be home, that from a positive standpoint, it has raised the idea of indoor air and surface quality to a whole new level. And that is a very positive development from this.
You know, I'm going to share something with you, Glenn. It's kind of funny. I will talk about it next week, because I want to kind of do it probably under a design perspective. But it's really funny. We don't realize this. I didn't realize this. I took it for granted that I was laying out public bathrooms and stuff like that in a certain way, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know that how infectious diseases, there is a direct correlation between infectious diseases and how they have shaped American bathroom design?
I didn't realize that.
Right. And because I didn't either until this thing kind of brought it to my attention. There are times, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. This is fascinating. I'll just leave it at that because I really want to do a show on this from the design side of things. because there's other things that we're already starting to incorporate in our design and advising to our clients relevant to this. I mean, exactly like what you're talking about. And this is another layer that we will be basically bringing to bear as well. But if you think about, do you know why there's guest bathrooms downstairs in most houses?
No.
Okay, so guest bathrooms began when you used to get deliveries for coal and things of that nature, for the trade person to actually be able to wash their hands between one visit and another. So not in every situation, but in the nicer homes, they provided a guest bathroom for the trade person who's making the delivery. And that's how that became. It was like maybe there's a sink or something off to one side. Then there was also a toilet, because they didn't want, in those homes, they didn't want that delivery person to use the family's facilities. So they provided a staff bathroom, right? That then became the guest bathroom in most homes. And then American bathroom design, just so public spaces, it actually has correlation with infectious diseases, wipeable surfaces was something that basically got developed and started for hospitals and things like that, and then it translated itself to residential. You know, it's fascinating that what we're going through right now is not an odd situation. It is a crisis that is bringing things to the forefront that, in the end, should they be applicable and not necessarily maybe forced, but let's say allowed to be part of the regular requirements for things, that becomes a better thing for everybody. And I honestly believe that, as important as the impact of this coronavirus has been, and nobody has been spared, everybody's been touched in some form or the other, right?
Yes.
Globally, that I cannot imagine that we are not going to have some sort of incentivization that happens to encourage people to incorporate this into their homes. I mean, if we had that for solar panels, and from the perspective of energy efficiency, and energy efficiency, you could argue, is not health driven. Energy efficiency is cost driven, financial health driven, but not really physical health driven. I cannot imagine that we are not going to see, whether it's about air or maybe water quality or whatever, that we are not going to see some of this stuff become incentivized for people, businesses, trades that are involved in this to take it on as something that now we champion.
I agree with you completely. And I think especially states like we're in, like California, will be real leaders going forward, coming out of this crisis in that area. But I definitely agree.
I mean, I don't want to brag about my state again, but they do say, as California goes, so goes the nation.
That's right. That's right. Well, I also wanted to reference that we have seen a number of third-party independent studies that have specifically discussed bipolar ionization and what we're doing at AtmosAir. One of the ones that I would mention for your listeners, Michael Bloomberg's philanthropic group, the Center for Active Design, has got the CDC and a who's who clientele, and specifically, as you know, provides design recommendations in terms of being able to further green a building.
Yeah. So
several weeks ago, they had a white paper that came out that had 5 things you can do to better to design your building to protect against coronavirus. And AtmosAir and bipolar ionization was the 5th of 5 recommendations from that particular group.
Congratulations.
So thank you. I think there is the awareness level is there, and it is very gratifying because it's a lot of what we do involves an education process and trying to change mindsets. And I agree. I think
Sure.
that we're now, in the design community that you're so prolific and active in terms of mechanical contractors, hopefully in the world of the residential HVAC contractors, but more importantly, driven by the people that are living in their homes every day, and working in these offices, I do think that we're going to see significant progress during the next couple of years. And I think we will see the kind of positive incentives to try to accelerate the installation of this type of technology in many states, and hopefully somewhere down the road we'll get some leadership on the federal side there as well.
I think it's inevitable. I mean, I think, I hate to put it this way, but I think there's a perfect storm brewing, and it's driven by concern that's heightened because of this, but it wasn't there to begin with. And I think out of this adversity will come innovation of how this thing is applicable. The scalability factor of it is phenomenal. I mean, the price point that you were telling me about, and you mentioned earlier, makes it viable even for developers, like people that are building multi-unit housing, basically. And again, that's without even using it as a unique value proposition or a unique offering, branding, amenity kind of thing. Like, the first people that are going to put this in, you may not be charging more for somebody to be in there, but the fact that you have it may get your building filled quicker for the rate that you want, kind of thing. So, again, I'm not trying to be, all just esoteric and the sort of the goodness of all of this. There's also a financial benefit, I think, from a business perspective, strategically, if you take this approach, because right now people's attentions are, I was in danger, I was in jeopardy, I'm not leaving my house because for some odd reason I believe I can control my existence better in my home than if I venture out. If I venture out, there's going to be a certain degree of it. I've been kind of dealing with people that have been all gung-ho about reopening the business and all this stuff. And I was the first person from day one that said this shutdown is not sustainable. So don't get me wrong, right? But now that we're looking at basically opening businesses, everybody's trying to rush into opening businesses, opening beaches, all this stuff. And if what's funny is they're like, well, why are you against this? I said, that's not what I'm saying, but let me ask you a question. Are you ready to actually send your kids back to school with kids of families that you don't know? Because if you answer yes, hats off to you. You're already in that space where you're ready to move on and open up and all this stuff, right? If your answer to yourself, you don't even have to give me the answer, but if your answer to yourself is no, I'm not, then why is it okay for people to open their businesses?
True.
I mean, you may risk yourself, but you're never going to risk your child, right? And it's a school environment. It's not like you're sending them down to South Central where, you may have some drive-bys. This is a school environment. And again, you have it on the list. I mean, education facilities would be a perfect situation for this. And the scalability of it means that even, public school systems, private charter schools, any of those entities can basically bring it on. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to walk me through this today, because I think it's valuable information for everybody to be aware of. Yes, maybe we're manipulatively basically bringing it to people's attention when their attentions are heightened on this, but pay attention to it. Go find out about it. And so I've got the website for AtmosAir up there.com, and we mentioned your website, but how can people get hold of you? How can they find out more about this, Glenn?
Absolutely. Anyone that would like to get more information, first, they can simply Google Gabbard Energy Group. That's our website for our holding company. But in addition to that, I encourage your listeners to text or call me. I will give you my phone number, which is 925-381-1102, 925-381-1102, or feel free to email me. I'm a Glenn with two N's, so it's Glenn and then Gabbard1, GlennGabbard1 @gmail.com, and would be delighted to help any of your listeners any way we can.
Thank you, Glenn, very much. I appreciate you taking the time. Have a wonderful weekend. And again, everybody, Glenn with two N's, Gabbard with two B's, GlennGabbard1, sure you put the one in, because I didn't put the one in and I couldn't get him on a Zoom call. At gmail.com. Look up Gabbard Energy Group.com, and then also AtmosAir.com. And you can always reach out to me if you have any questions regarding this or any design questions relevant to this, because it is going to become more and more important. And as everything in everything else of this nature, you can basically be dealing with people that are, to use a term, I don't know that we have one for coronavirus, but greenwashing versus really doing environmentally impactful things that are cost effective, and selling you sort of just what at the surface, the 8x10 glossy looks like it's effective, but it's not. Or you're dealing with people, at least to educate yourselves about what is the opportunities out there. And this technology is there. It's existed in other forms, but I found that what Glenn was sharing with me to be very viable. And like I said, I'm a very skeptical, jaded person. So if I'm looking at this technology and looking at bringing it to my clients, and possibly because of the measurable positive impact on people's lives and quality of lives, I suggest that you guys do the same and maybe look into it. Thank you, Glenn, very much for being with me.
It's my pleasure. Have yourself a great weekend. And of course, everybody stay safe.
Be safe, stay home. If you're going to stick your neck out of the gopher hole, put on a mask, grab some gloves. We'll be out of this soon enough, but how we deal with things today will shape what tomorrow looks like for each and every one of us. Thank you very much, Glenn. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.